Thank you very much for having me yet again on this wonderful platform where we engage on important issues that are very pertinent and important to the African people on the world scale, and in general issues that do affect Black people, African people, and all the other nationalities that we do find on the African continent and across the world. I'm Leslie Marisa, and I'm a historian, very much interested in the events that take place on the world scale, on the continental scale, and on the broader regional and cultural platforms. The issues that do affect the African nation by virtue of having stayed on the continent for a long time, by virtue of having been born on the continent itself. I do love history, and I love looking at the past and being able to make sure that the past shapes our current and the future. So I'm very much interested in African history, African politics, and the dynamics that are involved on the economic scale, on the educational scale. I'm an educator myself and a scientist as well. So that describes me. I'm quite dynamic in quite a number of issues, but of course, I'm very much hinged and more steeped in the history of the African people.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Lesley. Today, of course, we are talking of somebody that is very important in African history in terms of revolution and the dignity of the African people, the African person, and the African human right, as it were. So we are talking of the person of Steve Biko. Now, can you give us a short background of who this individual is in Africa? Because we are talking about his life and legacy.
Indeed, Steve Biko is an icon on the African continent in general, and in the South African context in particular. He is one of the people that stood and came up with a philosophy and propagated a philosophy. Not that he was the inventor of the philosophy itself, no, but he was the proponent, the major proponent of that philosophy on the South African context under the apartheid regime. He was a man, and he is a man that we do remember for his boldness, for his steadfastness, and for his bravery in trying to fight a system that was very much oppressive, a system that was segregatory, a system that underprivileged, systematically speaking, so the African natives. He was born in the Eastern Cape, that we know today as the Eastern Cape in South Africa, on the 18th of December 1946. His father was a police officer in the South African apartheid regime, who later on became a government clerk, and his mother was Alice Noguzola, and his father was Matthew Mzimai Biko. Steve Biko grew up in the Eastern Cape in a place, in a closer village, where he could see and experience the very experiences of a native Black African who was very much segregated, who was very much despised, whose dignity had been taken away. So he experienced these things firsthand from his childhood. And I think in a way that that is what really shaped him to later on become the man that he became. He was a brilliant young person, brilliant scholar, and later on grew to be one of the greatest icons that we can ever talk of in the South African context when it comes to the restoration of the dignity of the African person, the respect of the African person, and the simple respect of the African native on their African soil. So Steve Biko was a nationalist, a socialist, but indeed he was a person who came from a background that was deprived, segregated, oppressed, systematically so, by a system, an evil system, a colonial system, and an imposed system.
What do we know about the formation of Steve Biko? I mean, he now getting education, getting formed as an individual. Okay, he have experienced the racism, the discrimination of the citizens of a country. You know, some other people came to the land and they turned the people of the land into sort of mini slave, treated them, taking away their right. So he have seen this. He didn't need to be told about this. But for him to stand up and able to be who he became, he needed some formation, he needed some training. Is there anything that you can tell us about that?
Yeah, and indeed, I think when you get to experience segregation and oppression in real time and in real terms, the system on its own shapes your mentality, shapes the way you think. Remember, he was raised in a poor Xhosa family, and he grew up in a township. So by virtue of him growing up in a township, it means that he grew up in a location where his parents, his grandparents, his descendants had been forcibly placed by the Land Act of the oppressive colonial individuals who had arrived on the South African, on the tip of the African continent in 1652. So we have colonialists who came in, they dispossessed his people, they moved people from their natural land, and as long as your natural resource is possibly taken away from you, you are deprived of your economic independence, you are deprived of your financial independence, you are deprived of your dignity, you are deprived of your human rights, you are systematically dispossessed, systematically disenfranchised, systematically oppressed, so to speak. So you grew up in a township. The conditions that were prevalent in the townships, they were anti-family, anti-blacks, anti-development in essence and in verity, in word and in deed. And he grew up in one of the, he had to attend a Bantu education, an education that was very much oppressive, segregation in nature, segregative in nature, oppressive, colonial, meant to divert and shape the African mindset in a particular path, which made sure that the African dignity was eroded from their minds, whilst the white colonial mindset was being elevated in the process, that everything European is divine, everything European is holy, anything that is African and native in nature is very much inferior. So you grow up in that kind of scenario, so to speak, and the experience itself shapes the mentality, the mindset, the philosophy. And by virtue of him being a brilliant student, he had to be enrolled in university at the University of Natal to study medicine. When he got there at the university, you could see the system was very much anti-black. The system was very much anti-African. The system was very much anti-natives, pro-European, pro-white, and very much segregative in nature, be it the medium of instruction, be it the system of education. They could not mingle. The domineering of the white person over the black person, by virtue of them having less pigmentation in their skin tone, that would definitely result in them having more privileges. So this is the kind of system that he had to go through. This is what he had to experience on a day-to-day basis, be it in the halls of residence, be it in the cafeteria, be it in this classroom itself, be it in the laboratory. He had to experience all this, be it in class. So the lecturers were very much biased and very much biased against him and biased towards the European students, not by virtue of them being good, not by virtue of them being brilliant, but by virtue of them having a skin tone that is less melanin, by virtue of them having long hair, which is not African in nature. So by virtue of them having a pointed nose. So those are the kind of things that he had to go through in his educational system.